ever felt the ache of wanting to be held, only to flinch when someone reaches out? Have you ever longed for a love so deep it could fill the silent spaces inside you, yet found yourself building invisible walls the moment someone tried to step closer? There is a peculiar ache in the heart of those who fear intimacy, a paradox that is as old as longing itself. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of a warm, inviting ocean. The water glimmers with promise, and you crave the feeling of being enveloped, weightless, safe. But as you step forward, something inside you pulls back. Your toes curl into the sand, your breath catches, and you retreat, watching the waves from a distance. You want to dive in, but the fear of drowning is stronger than the desire to swim. Why do some of us yearn for love, yet run from it the moment it draws near? Why do we crave closeness, only to find ourselves recoiling at the touch, sometimes even from those we trust the most? Is it possible to want connection so desperately and yet be terrified of what it might reveal about us, or what it might take away? If you've ever felt this way, you are not alone. The fear of intimacy is a silent companion for many, one that rarely shows its face, but shapes our lives in profound ways. It whispers in the quiet moments, in the hesitation before a confession, in the urge to pull away just as things get real. It is misunderstood, mislabeled, and often hidden beneath layers of humor, independence, or even indifference. But what if I told you that this fear is not a flaw, but a story? A story written by your experiences, your wounds, your hopes, and your need for safety. What if understanding this story could change not just your relationships, but the way you see yourself? In this video, we'll explore the hidden truths about the fear of intimacy, truths that most people never see. We'll journey beneath the surface, into the quiet places where longing and fear meet, and together, we'll discover how understanding this paradox can transform not only how you love others, but how you love yourself. Stay with me. What you're about to learn might just change everything. When we talk about people who fear intimacy, the world reaches for easy labels: commitment-phobe, emotionally unavailable, cold, distant. These words are tossed around in conversations, in movies, in the quiet frustration of partners and friends. They become shorthand for a kind of person who seems to always keep others at arm's length, who never quite lets anyone in. Most people think they know this story. They see someone who hesitates to say, "I love you," who avoids deep conversations, who disappears when things get serious. The assumption is simple. They just don't care enough. They're selfish, or maybe even broken. Maybe they're playing games, or they're afraid of growing up. The world shrugs and moves on, leaving these people behind in a cloud of misunderstanding. But what if the story is more complicated than that? What if beneath the surface there is a storm of longing and fear, hope and hesitation? What if the person who seems so distant is actually fighting a silent battle every day? A battle between the desire to connect and the terror of being truly seen. For those who live with this fear, the stereotypes cut deep. To be called cold when your heart is burning with longing. To be labeled unavailable when you crave closeness more than anything. There is a unique kind of loneliness in being misunderstood, not just by others, but sometimes by yourself. You wonder if you really are broken, if you're destined to always be on the outside looking in. And for those who have never felt this fear, it's easy to judge. It's easy to see only the surface, to miss the quiet suffering beneath. But every label is a wall, and every wall hides a story. So before we go any further, let's pause. Let's look beyond the cliches and the easy answers. Let's remember that every person who seems distant has a reason, a history, a heart that beats with longing and fear. The surface story is just that, a surface. The truth, as always, lies deeper. Let's step beyond the surface, into the quiet spaces where the real story lives. If you could listen to the heart of someone who fears intimacy, you wouldn't hear indifference or coldness. You'd hear a symphony of longing and caution, hope and hesitation. You'd hear the echoes of old wounds, the soft thud of a heart that wants to trust but remembers what it's like to be hurt. Beneath avoidance, there is vulnerability. Beneath distance, there is a deep desire for connection, sometimes so deep it feels dangerous. For many, the fear of intimacy is not a lack of feeling, but the presence of feeling so intense, so overwhelming that it becomes almost unbearable. It's not that they don't want to be close, it's that closeness feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind threatening to sweep them away. This fear is not a character flaw. It is, in many ways, a brilliant adaptation, a way the mind and body have learned to protect themselves from pain. Imagine a child who reached out for comfort and was met with rejection, or whose trust was broken by someone they loved. Over time, the nervous system learns closeness is risky, vulnerability can hurt. The walls that rise are not signs of weakness, but of survival. Psychologists call this adaptation attachment style. Research shows that our earliest relationships, often with parents or caregivers, shape the way we approach closeness for the rest of our lives. If those early bonds were safe and nurturing, we learned that intimacy is a place of comfort. But if they were unpredictable, neglectful, or even frightening, we may come to see intimacy as a threat. Trauma, too, leaves its mark. For some, the fear of intimacy is rooted in experiences of betrayal, loss, or emotional neglect. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The nervous system, always vigilant, becomes wired for self-protection. When someone gets too close, alarms go off, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a roar. The urge to pull away isn't a choice, it's a reflex, a way to stay safe. Even in adulthood, these patterns persist. The brain, shaped by years of experience, continues to scan for danger. A loving gesture can feel suspicious. A moment of vulnerability can trigger panic. The very thing that is most desired, connection, becomes the thing most feared. But here's the hidden truth. Beneath every act of avoidance, there is a longing to be seen, to be known, to be loved without fear. The walls are not there to keep people out forever. They are there to keep pain at bay, until it feels safe enough to let someone in. Understanding this hidden reality is the first step toward compassion, both for ourselves and for others. When we see fear of intimacy not as a flaw, but as a story of survival, we can begin to soften. We can begin to ask, "What happened to you?" instead of "What's wrong with you?" We can start to see the courage it takes to even try, to reach out, to hope for something more. And here's where the journey begins. Because when you understand the hidden reality, you hold the key to healing. You can start to rewrite the story, not by tearing down the walls all at once, but by gently, patiently learning what safety feels like. You can begin to offer yourself the compassion you always deserved. Most people never see this side of the story, but you do, and that understanding can change everything. To truly understand the fear of intimacy, we need to look at the architecture of the mind, the blueprints drawn in childhood, the scaffolding built by experience, the invisible threads that tie our past to our present. These threads are woven from psychology, biology, and the stories we tell ourselves about love and safety. Let's begin with attachment styles, the silent scripts we inherit from our earliest relationships. Psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth discovered that the way we bond with our caregivers as children shapes how we approach closeness as adults. If you grew up with caregivers who were consistently loving and responsive, you likely developed a secure attachment. You learned that love is safe, that your needs will be met, and that it's okay to reach out. But not everyone is so lucky. If your caregivers were unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, you might develop an anxious attachment. You crave closeness, but you're always afraid it will be taken away. Every silence feels like abandonment, every argument a threat to the relationship's survival. Then there's the avoidant attachment style. If your caregivers were emotionally unavailable or discouraged dependence, you learned to rely on yourself. You became self-sufficient even when you needed comfort. Closeness feels suffocating, and independence becomes your armor. Some people develop a disorganized attachment, a confusing mix of longing and fear, often rooted in trauma or chaotic caregiving. Love feels unpredictable, even dangerous. You want to be close, but you don't know how, and every attempt feels fraught with risk. These attachment styles are not conscious choices. They are survival strategies, written into the nervous system before we have words. They shape how we love, how we fight, how we pull away or cling too tightly. And unless we recognize them, they can run our lives from the shadows. But attachment is only part of the story. The mind is a master of protection, and it has many tools at its disposal. These are called defense mechanisms, psychological shields that keep pain at bay. Some people use intellectualization, turning feelings into thoughts, analyzing instead of experiencing. Others use humor to deflect, making light of vulnerability so no one sees the fear underneath. Some simply withdraw, disappearing into work, hobbies, or solitude whenever things get too close for comfort. These defenses are not weaknesses. They are ingenious adaptations, honed over years of learning what is safe and what is not. But they can also become prisons, keeping us from the very connection we crave. At the heart of the fear of intimacy is the fear of vulnerability, the terror of being truly seen. To let someone in is to risk exposure, to show the parts of ourselves we're not sure are lovable. What if they see my flaws? What if they leave when they know the real me? Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, but also of rejection, and for many, the risk feels too great. This fear is often fueled by shame and self-worth, the quiet, persistent belief that we are not enough or that we are too much. Maybe you grew up hearing that your feelings were too sensitive or that your needs were too demanding. Maybe you learned to hide your true self to keep the peace or to avoid being hurt. Over time, these messages become internalized. I am unlovable. I am a burden. If I let someone in, they'll see the truth and leave. These beliefs are powerful, and they shape every interaction. They whisper in the background, urging us to keep our distance, to protect ourselves from the pain of being found out. But the story doesn't end with the individual. Societal influences, the culture we grow up in, the roles we're expected to play, the scripts handed down by family and community also shape our relationship with intimacy. In some cultures, emotional expression is discouraged, especially for men. Vulnerability is seen as weakness, and independence is prized above all else. In others, family loyalty or social expectations can make it hard to form close bonds outside the group. Even within families, unspoken rules can reinforce intimacy fears. Maybe you were taught that we don't talk about feelings, or that love is shown, not said. Maybe you watched your parents keep secrets, or saw affection withheld as punishment. These patterns become part of your own story, shaping how you approach closeness for years to come. What's striking is how invisible these mechanisms can be, even to those who live them. You might not realize you're pulling away until a relationship ends. You might not see the pattern until you've repeated it again and again. The mind is skilled at hiding its own defenses, making them feel like simple truths. I'm just not a relationship person. I don't need anyone. It's safer this way. But here's the promise. Recognizing these patterns is the key to breaking free. When you see the architecture of your own defenses, you can begin to choose differently. You can start to question the old stories, to gently challenge the beliefs that keep you isolated. You can learn to offer yourself the compassion you always needed and to risk, little by little, the vulnerability that makes love possible. Let's step into the lives of those who fear intimacy, not as case studies, but as living, breathing stories. Because behind every pattern, every defense is a person with a heart that beats, a mind that remembers, and a soul that longs for connection.
There's Alex. Alex is the life of the party. Witty, charming, always ready with a joke. Friends admire how easygoing he seems, how he never gets too attached. But what they don't see is the pattern that repeats, quietly, every time a relationship starts to deepen. When someone gets close, Alex feels a tightening in his chest, a sense of being trapped. He starts to notice flaws in his partner, little annoyances that grow into reasons to leave. He picks fights over nothing, or suddenly becomes too busy to meet. It's as if, just as the garden of love begins to bloom, Alex pulls up the roots, afraid of what might grow. He tells himself he's just not ready, but deep down he wonders if he's even capable of real love. Then there's Maya. Maya is the friend everyone confides in. She listens deeply, offers advice, and always knows how to lighten the mood. But when the conversation turns to her fears, her dreams, her pain, she changes the subject, makes a joke, or asks another question. She craves closeness, but only on her terms, only when she's the one giving. To let someone see her vulnerability feels like standing naked in a storm. She's like a turtle retreating into its shell at the first sign of danger, her softest parts hidden away. Sometimes, late at night, she wonders if anyone truly knows her, or if she's built her life on the safety of being needed rather than being known. And there's Sam. Sam is in a loving relationship. There are moments of deep connection, shared laughter, whispered secrets, the comfort of a hand held in the dark. But after these moments, Sam feels exposed, raw, almost panicked. He withdraws, becomes distant, loses himself in work or screens. His partner is left confused, wondering what went wrong. For Sam, intimacy is like a garden that blooms only at night, beautiful but fleeting, always retreating before the dawn. He wants to stay, to let the light in, but the fear of being seen is overwhelming. He loves deeply, but the risk of loss, of disappointment, feels too great to bear. These stories are not rare. They are the quiet undercurrent in so many lives. The friend who never calls first, the partner who pulls away after a fight, the person who seems to have it all together but never lets anyone close enough to see the cracks. Each story is unique, but the themes are universal. The longing for connection, the fear of vulnerability, the ache of being misunderstood. Let me share a personal story. There was a time in my own life when I too feared intimacy. I remember sitting across from someone I cared about, feeling the urge to share something real, something raw. My heart pounded, my palms sweated, and just as the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back. I smiled instead, changed the subject, and watched as the moment passed. Later, I felt both relief and regret, a familiar dance between safety and loneliness. It took years to understand that my fear wasn't about the other person, but about the stories I carried, that I was too much, that my needs were a burden, that if I was truly seen, I would be left behind. These stories matter. They remind us that fear of intimacy is not a flaw, but a response, a way of protecting the most tender parts of ourselves. It's easy to judge from the outside, to label someone as distant or cold, but inside, there is a world of complexity, memories of past hurts, hopes for something better, and the quiet courage it takes to try again. Metaphors help us understand. Fear of intimacy is like a turtle retreating into its shell, not because it doesn't want to be part of the world, but because it knows how sharp the world can be. It's like a garden that blooms only at night, beautiful, but afraid of the harshness of daylight. It's like a door left slightly ajar, waiting for someone patient enough to knock, gentle enough to wait.
If you see yourself in these stories, know this: you are not alone. Your fear is not a weakness, but a sign of how deeply you feel, how much you care. And if you love someone who fears intimacy, remember that their distance is not a rejection, but a request for patience, for understanding, for safety. There is a quiet, aching cost to being misunderstood. For those who fear intimacy, the world's misjudgment can feel like a second wound, one layered on top of the original pain. When others see only distance or indifference, they miss the silent struggle happening beneath the surface. They don't see the longing, the effort, the hope that maybe this time things will be different. The pain of being misjudged is sharp. It's the friend who stops calling because they think you don't care. The partner who leaves convinced you're incapable of love. The family member who shakes their head, unable to understand why you keep your heart so guarded. Each misunderstanding is a small loss, a door that quietly closes, a connection that never fully forms. But perhaps the deepest cost is internal. When you're labeled as cold or unavailable, it's easy to start believing it yourself. Self-blame creeps in. Maybe I am broken. Maybe I don't deserve love. Shame settles in the spaces where connection should be, whispering that your needs are too much or that your fears make you unworthy. The ache of unmet needs grows heavier with each missed opportunity, each relationship that withers before it can bloom. This is the cycle of loneliness and self-sabotage, a loop that repeats quietly year after year. Without understanding, the same patterns play out. You reach for connection, fear rises, you pull away, and the world confirms your worst fears by turning away in return. The loneliness deepens, and the hope for something different fades. But it doesn't have to be this way. The first step to breaking the cycle is understanding. Seeing the fear of intimacy not as a flaw, but a story that can be rewritten. Without this understanding, the cost is high. Relationships lost, potential unlived, a life spent on the outside looking in. Change often begins in the quietest of moments. A pause, a question, a flicker of awareness that something could be different. For those who fear intimacy, this moment is like the first crack of light through a long closed window. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but it changes everything. Maybe it happens in the middle of a conversation, when you notice yourself pulling away just as someone leans in. Maybe it's the ache you feel after another relationship ends, the realization that the pattern is painfully familiar. Or maybe it's a gentle question from a friend or therapist. What are you afraid might happen if you let someone in? Suddenly, you see the pattern, not as fate, but a story you've been living, one that can be understood and, with time, rewritten. Research shows that awareness is the first step toward transformation. In therapy, people begin to name their fears, to trace them back to their roots. They learn that their defenses were once necessary, but that they no longer have to be prisons. In safe relationships, they experiment with vulnerability, sharing a little more, risking a little more, and discovering that the world doesn't end when they do. Consider the story of Lena. For years, Lena avoided deep relationships, convinced she was destined to be alone. But one day, in a moment of honesty with a close friend, she admitted her fear, not just of being hurt, but of being truly seen. Her friend listened, without judgment, and something shifted. It was the first crack of light, the first breath of fresh air in a room that had been closed for too long. From there, Lena began to seek help, to reflect, to try again. Each small step was a victory, a sign that change was possible. This is the turning point, the realization that fear is not fate, that patterns can be seen and shifted. It's the beginning of a new story, one where hope is possible and where the heart, once guarded, can begin to open. Awareness is the first crack of light, but real change comes from what we do with that light. If you recognize yourself in these stories, know that you are not powerless. There are tools, strategies, and insights rooted in research and real-life experience that can help you gently shift your relationship with intimacy. These are not quick fixes, but invitations to a deeper, more authentic connection with others and, most importantly, with yourself.
1. Self-reflection prompts. Meeting yourself with curiosity. Begin with gentle self-inquiry. The goal is not to judge, but to understand. Set aside a quiet moment, perhaps with a journal, and ask yourself, when do I feel myself pulling away from others? What sensations arise in my body when someone gets close, physically or emotionally? What am I afraid might happen if I let someone in? What stories do I tell myself about love, trust, and vulnerability? Where did I learn these stories? Whose voice do I hear in my head when I hesitate to open up? Writing your answers can help you see patterns and triggers. Over time, you may notice that certain situations, words, or gestures consistently spark your fear. Awareness is the first step toward change. 2. Mindfulness practices, grounding in the present. When fear of intimacy strikes, it often feels like a tidal wave, sudden, overwhelming, and hard to control. Mindfulness can help you stay anchored. Try this simple grounding exercise. Sit comfortably and place your feet flat on the floor. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale gently. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. As you do this, remind yourself, I am safe in this moment. Practicing mindfulness regularly can help you recognize when you're being pulled into old patterns and give you the space to choose a different response. 3. Therapeutic approaches, healing with support. Sometimes the roots of intimacy fears run deep into childhood, trauma, or long-standing beliefs about self-worth. Working with a therapist can be transformative. Here are a few approaches that research has shown to be effective. Attachment-based therapy helps you understand your attachment style and how it shapes your relationships. Through a safe therapeutic relationship, you can begin to rewrite old scripts and practice new ways of connecting. Somatic experiencing focuses on the body's role in holding and releasing trauma. By tuning into physical sensations, you can learn to calm your nervous system and feel safer in moments of closeness. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Especially helpful for those with trauma histories, EMDR can help you process painful memories that fuel your fear of intimacy.
If therapy feels daunting, remember, seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. You don't have to do this alone. Communication skills, speaking your truth safely. One of the most powerful tools for overcoming intimacy fears is learning to communicate openly and honestly. This doesn't mean sharing everything all at once, but rather practicing small acts of vulnerability. You might say, "Sometimes I get scared when things get close. It's not about you, it's something I'm working on." Or, "I need a little space right now, but I care about you and want to stay connected." Or, "It's hard for me to talk about my feelings, but I'm trying." Expressing your needs and fears can feel terrifying, but it also invites understanding and support. The right people will respond with patience and care. Gradual exposure, building tolerance for closeness. Just as you wouldn't run a marathon without training, you don't have to dive headfirst into deep intimacy. Gradual exposure is a research-backed strategy for building tolerance to what feels overwhelming. Start small. Allow yourself to accept a compliment without deflecting. Share a personal story with a trusted friend. Practice making eye contact during conversations. Let someone do something kind for you and notice how it feels. Each small step is a victory. Over time, your comfort with closeness will grow, and the old fears will lose their grip. Rewriting the narrative, from fear to curiosity. Remember, the stories you tell yourself about intimacy are not set in stone. With each new experience, you have the chance to write a new chapter. When fear arises, try to meet it with curiosity instead of judgment. Ask yourself, what is this fear trying to protect me from? What would happen if I stayed just a little longer in this moment of connection?
FOMO trigger, the promise of authentic connection. These tools are not just about surviving relationships, they are about transforming them. When you begin to understand and gently challenge your fear of intimacy, you open the door to deeper, more authentic connections. You give yourself the chance to be seen, known, and loved, not despite your fears, but alongside them. Imagine a life where you can let someone in, where you can trust yourself to handle the risks and rewards of closeness. Imagine feeling at home in your own skin, able to offer and receive love with an open heart. This is not a distant dream, it is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer. It's easy to see fear of intimacy as a weakness, a flaw to be fixed. But what if, instead, we saw it as a quiet strength, a sign of deep sensitivity, wisdom, and self-protection? What if your hesitance to let others in is not evidence of brokenness, but proof of how exquisitely attuned you are to risk and safety? You are not broken. You are not too much or not enough. You are someone who has learned, through experience, to listen closely to the signals of your own heart. You know what it means to be cautious, to weigh the cost of vulnerability, to protect the most tender parts of yourself. This is not a failing, it is a form of wisdom. People who fear intimacy often possess unique gifts. Your empathy runs deep because you know what it's like to feel exposed and uncertain. Your discernment is sharp, allowing you to sense the true intentions of others, to recognize sincerity and kindness. And when you do choose to trust, your capacity for connection is profound, because you do not give your heart lightly. When you love with intention, with depth, with a courage that is hard-won. The world needs people like you, people who understand the value of trust, who honor the sacredness of closeness, who bring a gentle awareness to every relationship. Your journey may be different, your path more winding, but it is no less worthy. In fact, it is a testament to your resilience and your hope. So let yourself feel proud of the ways you have protected yourself, even as you learn to open up. Let yourself belong, not in spite of your fears, but because of the wisdom they have given you. You are not alone on this path. There is a quiet strength in your story, and it is something to be honored. To fear intimacy is, in truth, to long for it deeply. It is the paradox at the heart of being human, the ache for closeness and the instinct to protect ourselves from the pain it might bring. If you have recognized yourself in these words, know that your fear is not a flaw, it is a story. And like all stories, it can be rewritten. Healing does not happen all at once. It is not a leap, but a series of small, trembling steps. Each time you choose to stay present when you want to run, each time you share a piece of your truth, each time you offer yourself compassion instead of criticism, you are walking toward the love you deserve. You are learning that safety and connection can coexist, that your heart can be both cautious and open. Remember, the fear of intimacy is not a sign of weakness, but of feeling. It means your heart is alive, that you care deeply, that you have not given up on love, even if it sometimes feels out of reach. The journey is not about erasing your fear, but about learning to carry it with kindness, to let it soften rather than harden you. So as you move forward, let yourself be gentle,
Let yourself be present. Let yourself try again, even if your voice shakes and your hands tremble. The world is full of people who are also learning, also longing, also afraid. You are not alone. And if you ever doubt your worth, remember this: the heart that fears is the heart that feels. And every heart, even the most guarded, is worthy of love. Embracing this journey, choosing to understand, to heal, to risk connection, will not only change your relationships, but will open you to a richer, more authentic life. The story is yours to write, and every page is a chance to begin again.